Good afternoon. I'm Rick Cotton, Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I'm joined today by Ray LaHood, former U.S. Transportation Secretary and currently a Senior Advisor at DLA Piper, a leading international law firm. I'm also joined by Huntley Lawrence, the Director of the Aviation Department at the Port Authority. I will turn it over to Secretary LaHood shortly, but I'd like to start first with an apology on behalf of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for the events that unfolded and compounded after the January 4 winter storm and frigid temperatures. What happened was completely unacceptable and cannot be allowed to happen again. We are committed to fixing it. As previously announced, Secretary LaHood has been retained to conduct a comprehensive and independent investigation into how things unfolded, what went wrong, and what measures are needed to fix the situation in the future. But we cannot wait. We look forward to Secretary LaHood's report, which is expected to be ready in approximately 90 to 120 days. In the meantime, however, we are not waiting to take action. Future storms will come, and soon, and we simply have to assure that JFK performs better, much better, and starting now. With this in mind, we are announcing a series of immediate interim measures for JFK during winter storms that aim to address the failures that we have diagnosed to date. The interim measures were developed by the Aviation Department, led by Director Lawrence, at my direction, and in close collaboration with the airport community of terminal operators, airlines, and other stakeholders at the airport over the past 10 days. Taken together, these interim measures establish an improved framework for how JFK Airport can operate more effectively, more efficiently, and more collaboratively to avoid the failures that occurred in the wake of Winter Storm Grayson. As I stated last week, one of the primary failures that occurred was a lack of coordination between the private terminal operators and international airlines. But there are other failures as well. Taken together, they led to lack of available gates, unbearable wait times, poor communication with passengers, the unconscionable baggage situation, and other challenges. This lack of coordination must and will change. Many of the measures we are taking today are aimed squarely at this: improved coordination and information sharing to assure better operations after storms and more effective decision-making during the storm and immediately after the storm as the airport recovers. The other thing I'd like to say before getting into the details of these measures is that we are fully cooperating with the request from the FAA that we received Tuesday. We also welcome any and all input from the U.S. Department of Transportation and the FAA, both on the measures we're announcing today and on the broader investigation. Let me now take you quickly through the individual measures that we are announcing today. First, the JFK Emergency Operations Center. Prior to the start of any significant predicted storm, JFK Airport will activate its Emergency Operations Center located on the airport grounds. The EOC will operate on a 24/7 basis for the duration of any storm, as well as the duration of all recovery operations. The objectives are twofold: the immediate sharing of information among key stakeholders, including terminal operators and airlines, about all relevant airport operations, and informed real-time decisions about airport operations to ensure the safe and efficient functioning of the airport during a storm, and as I said, importantly, during the period of recovery, including the return of baggage to customers. Additionally, the EOC will have the further responsibility to establish immediate, constant, and consistent flow of information to passengers and to the public. The EOC will be under the direction of the general manager of the airport and will have mandatory participation by all organizations involved in JFK's operation. Second, mutual aid. All JFK terminal operators, airlines, and other key members of the airport community are being directed to commit to a mutual aid framework that will enable the expeditious provision of assistance from one entity to another that is in need during a storm emergency. This will include, but not be limited to, access to gates, access to staff, access to equipment, and the use of other facilities. This is something that could have a very significant impact on ameliorating some of the conditions, including in particular gate availability, that occurred in the days following Winter Storm Grayson. Third, communications to passengers. During winter storms, customer communication is critical, and it was one of the areas that saw extreme deficiency following the storm. A big part of the Emergency Operations Center's mandate will be to establish operating procedures to assure that terminal operators, their airline customers, as well as the Port Authority's JFK staff are providing accurate, frequent, and consistent updates. Fourth, inbound aircraft traffic. During storm emergencies, when the EOC is activated, the Emergency Operations Center will issue on an as-needed basis formal notifications to terminal operators to manage the rate of incoming flights with their airline customers. Fifth, gate assignment and wait times. During storm emergencies, the Emergency Operations Center will coordinate with terminal operators to ensure that all inbound flights are assigned a gate or an arrival locations or an arrival location where passengers deplane by stairs and are bused to a terminal. In any instance where the estimated timing for passenger deplaning is more than 90 minutes after its touchdown time, terminal operators will be required to consult immediately with the Port Authority to identify alternative locations to avoid excessive further delays. Sixth, gate availability. Another major issue that was encountered following the storm was the inability by some terminal operators to move inactive planes off of gates to make way for other planes to use the gate. The Port Authority is modifying procedures to assure that inactive planes are moved off of gates promptly when the gate is needed for further arriving airplanes. With respect to baggage, equipment, and staffing, we all know that the baggage situation over the course of the past 2 weeks was one of the most visible breakdowns. What was less visible were ground equipment failures due to the frigid temperatures, as well as significant staffing shortages for many of the organizations at the airport. For each of these issues, we have directed relevant organizations to present short-term improvements, as well as develop longer-term plans that address the systemic issues for presentation to Secretary LaHood and his team. Finally, in light of the water main break on Sunday, January 5th, which compounded the already difficult conditions, the Port Authority is directing all terminal operators to complete inspections of all pipe and plumbing components within their facilities to ensure they are properly protected from winter weather conditions. We believe these interim initial steps are critically important. They are just that. They are immediate initial steps, and we look forward to Secretary LaHood's investigation and recommendations in terms of further longer-term improvements. With that, I will turn the podium over to Secretary LaHood.
The investigation begins today We will have a team of people that will look at everything, talk to everyone, and figure out why things happened the way they did and why certain things didn't happen the way they were supposed to. We will make recommendations for fixing the issues and the problems that need to be fixed, and we will do that in a time frame of between 90 and 120 days. And we will leave no stone unturned. We will get to the bottom of this, and our recommendations, I think, will go a long way to making sure that when there's a major snowstorm or other storm in the region, this will not happen again.
With that, we will take your questions.
How would things have been different if this had been in effect 2 weeks ago?
I think it would have, the interim steps had been in effect 2 weeks ago. I think we would have avoided many of the problems that the airport experienced. If these procedures had been in effect, first of all, there would be processes in place to limit the number of planes coming in to the airport at a time when gates were not available. The coordination on other fronts, the mutual aid provisions would address many of the problems that developed and which contributed to the failures that did occur. So these are initial steps, these are interim steps, and we will look forward to Secretary LaHood's recommendations in terms of broader and longer-term fixes.
Please state name and outlet.
Stacy Sager, Channel 7. Was it a mistake that the Port Authority put too much responsibility on these terminal operators instead of taking the responsibility itself? It seems like with this EOC controlling 24/7 of a snowstorm now that the Port Authority is saying, yeah, we need to step up. I mean, would you say that the Port Authority failed to step up during this last storm?
Well, what I would say is this, which is that is precisely the question that we are asking Secretary LaHood to look at hard and make recommendations. And what I would say is we are committed to fixing this situation. And if his recommendation is that the Port Authority needs to take a more aggressive role, the Port Authority will take a more aggressive role.
For Secretary LaHood, Andrew Schiff from WNBC. What is your message to people? We're still getting emails and calls today, 2 weeks after the storm, from folks who don't have their bags back. The Port Authority has apologized, but what can you tell those folks about what they should expect?
Well, I've received a few emails from people wanting to know if I can help them find their bags also. And I know this is a very, very frustrating situation. And my message would be that the Port Authority understands what a huge, big mess has occurred, and they're about to try and get it fixed. And I guess my message would be is help is on the way.
Do you know, Karen Matthews, Associated Press, do you know how many bags still have not been reunited with their owners? Is there an update?
As of yesterday, we know, excuse me, as of yesterday, there were a couple hundred bags that were still not reunited with their owners. It's a process they're actually following every single day to make sure that these bags get delivered through the airlines. Excuse me.
Marcia?
Marcia Kramer from CBS. My question to you, Rick, is this. Why is the baggage situation not been fixed? Today I spoke to a student who was leaving JFK to go to Madrid for an entire semester. All of his belongings, his clothes, his medicine, his books, have not been returned to him. He's in a foreign country with nothing. How is that acceptable, and what are you going to do to fix it?
Well, the answer is it's not acceptable. The Port Authority has issued directives to the organizations that do this. This is an airline responsibility. They employ both baggage handling companies and delivery companies. That's not an excuse. That's the nature of the problem, which is there needs to be far better coordination. If you take a step back, look, the fact is this system is broken. It is antiquated at JFK. There is not enough technology involved at JFK. This is the question that we want Secretary LaHood to look at. It needs to change dramatically. Part of the problem is that the facilities at JFK are simply out of date. Part of the problem is that there were organizations that were not staffed to carry out what they did. The situation needs to be fixed. We're committed to fixing it, but it needs a hard look, and we need to assign the responsibility to each of the component parts, and then we have to demand performance.
If I could just follow up, if the airline's position is that, I mean, if your position is that the airlines have the responsibility to get the luggage to its passengers, and yet you say that the technology is antiquated, how do you force the airlines to invest in better technology, or does the Port Authority have to bear the cost itself in order to make things better?
Well, frankly, again, we're going to look to Secretary LaHood for what needs to be done to fix this situation. This is not stepping away for responsibility. This situation needs to be fixed. The reason we have asked Secretary LaHood to come in is to give the public confidence that an independent view is going to be taken here. I cannot imagine a better person than Secretary LaHood, with his experience at the Department of Transportation, to look at this situation, get to the bottom of the failures, and then look forward. And there are comparisons. There are other airports that one can look to, and there is in fact going to be a major renovation that occurs at JFK going forward. And we intend to use that opportunity to assure that new facilities have capabilities which will avoid this problem in the future. And the question for Secretary LaHood is, in terms of the existing structure at JFK, exactly what measures should be taken by the organizations involved to fix it.
Noah Mansgar from Patch.com. A lot of the interim measures you announced put kind of the onus on the airlines and the terminal operators to review their policies, change the way they do things. What's the timeline along which you're expecting them to implement these changes, and how will you hold them accountable to make sure that they actually take these steps that you're expecting them to?
We've announced several of the interim measures which will be put into effect immediately in terms of looking forward, led by the Emergency Operation Center, the Mutual Aid Pact. The fixes that are to systems, we've asked them and we will demand from them immediate short-term improvements, and we will ask them to make recommendations and to submit to Secretary LaHood their plans for improvements on a longer-term basis. And we will ask for and insist on the short-term improvements within a matter of weeks.
Just to follow up, what happens if you find that they haven't made those improvements or submitted the proper plans? Are there consequences for the airlines or the operators?
They have obligations in their leases. Our major relationship is with the terminal operators. We will use every enforcement tool that we have with respect to the terminal operators if their subcontractors and contractors do not respond in a timely and effective manner.
How, you say that the system is antiquated. In what way is it antiquated? Is it lack of computerization? Is it old computerization? What are we talking about?
Well, primarily what we're talking about, everything from a lack of workspace to the absence of rapid computer processing of baggage, and then all of the transfer processes to move from baggage handler, identify where customers are, to delivery services, all of which are coordinated in a way that result in a high-quality service to the customer who has been separated from their luggage.
Two more questions, please. Anybody who hasn't asked yet? Pat McGinn from the Times. Secretary LaHood, could you just walk us through how your report will be put together and delivered, and who will see it before it's released to the public?
What we intend to do is conduct interviews with all of the major players. It would be my intention to also talk to passengers, get their take on it. It would be my intention to look at all of the statistics about decisions that were made during the snow activity in terms of, is the airport going to be open? Is it going to be closed? Should we cancel flights? And look at a lot of statistics in terms of what really caused all of this luggage to get backed up and for people to be stalled the way that they were. And then to really talk to the stakeholders. We have a meeting scheduled with the FAA. We're going to be meeting with the airlines. We're going to be meeting with the terminal operators. We've had some meetings with the folks here at the Port Authority, and we'll be doing other meetings. We'll figure out what the problem is, but more importantly, we're going to recommend solutions so that when there's a major snowstorm or some kind of weather calamity again, this won't happen. That there'll be systems in place, there'll be coordination in place, there'll be communication in place between all the people that operate these facilities so that this doesn't happen again. And when the report is done, it'll be made public. That's our intention.
Anybody else? Last question?
And that's just for Rick, with the Emergency Operations Center on site at JFK, how quickly can you get that up and running? For example, if there were a storm 2 weeks from now, would you have it in place?
I was waiting for you to ask that question. So what I'm happy to say is that the Emergency Operations Center was actually stood up a week ago, and it has been through 2 shakedown cruises, probably the wrong analogy, 2 shakedown flights. So the answer is it is up and operating, and it will be stood up by the general manager of JFK Airport in the case of all future storms.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.